Our next speaker is a biological anthropologist whose work intersects with several related fields, including bioarchaeology, paleopathology, paleoanthropology, and evolutionary medicine. She obtained her bachelor's degree in biological anthropology from the University of Alberta, her master's of science in human osteology and paleopathology from the University of Bradford, and her PhD in anthropology and archaeology from Durham University. She also held two postdoc positions at Simon Fraser University and a Marie Curie European Fellowship at the University of Liverpool. Her research interest aligns under an overriding theme, which is investigating how evolutionary adaptations have shaped modern human skeletal variation and how this variation influences human health and disease. The outcomes of her research are not only relevant for the field of biological anthropology, but also have the potential to impact the lives of people today. Let us all give a warm welcome to Dr. Kimberly Plomp.
So I'm going to talk today about digitizing bioarchaeology or human osteoarchaeology. I'm going to start by giving you just a rundown of the type of methods that are out there, and then I'm going to give you an overview of some really cool projects that have been done recently using digitization methods. Some of them will be mine, some of them won't be mine, but I just want to give you guys an idea of what the possibilities are with digitizing bioarchaeology, and maybe spark some interest for human osteoarchaeology, virtual anthropology, and maybe some of your own research projects. Okay. So for some of you may not have a background in this, so I'm just going to go over it really quickly. Bioarchaeology or human osteoarchaeology is the study of human remains in an archaeological context. It is very similar to biological anthropology and can be considered sister disciplines, if not one of them being an umbrella discipline. And biological anthropology is the study of the biological and behavioral aspects of humans. And that includes studying the fossil hominins, our deceased relatives, non-human primates, and our evolutionary relationships with them. It also includes is related to forensic anthropology. The main difference here is that with forensic anthropology, you're doing skeletal analysis and you're trying to find information related to solving a crime. All of these three disciplines have one thing in common, and that is that we want to learn everything we can from a human skeleton. The exact questions that each discipline answers might be different, and the methods that they use might be different, but really what we want to know is everything that we can learn about the population, about the individual, about their health, from their skeletal evidence. So in bioarchaeology, as well as biological anthropology and forensic anthropology, traditionally, the way that we've studied skeletons is by macroscopic description. So looking at them visually with your eyes. Sorry, my electricity in my office. Something just happened. So if you lose me, that's what happened. So we would describe them by looking at them with our eyes or a microscope, and you would take really detailed notes about descriptions. You would also measure. So we use a lot of the traditional methods relied on traditional linear measurements. So taking measurements with an osteometric board or calipers, visual descriptions, using microscopes and magnifying glasses, drawing, photography, and all of these tools and methods are still relevant. And same with, as Emil said, we're not replacing them, but we're adding to them. So these are the traditional methods of doing osteoarchaeology. In the last few decades, though, there's been a really big push in advancements in terms of technology and methodology for digitizing and virtual anthropology. A lot of these advancements happened in medicine and engineering, but in archaeology and biological anthropology, we've adopted them, and actually we've been some of the forefront in terms of the fields pushing the advancements and the interdisciplinary boundaries of using these methods. So the way that we can digitize bioarchaeology, which is the idea of taking the objects of the bone from the world where you are and digitizing it, making a virtual digital reconstruction of it in the computer that you can then manipulate and study in the digital realm. So the way to do that is CT scans. So you can take CT scans or MRI, any kind of medical imaging like that. So the example here is a mummy being CT scanned, but it could be living humans as well. That will create a three-dimensional model that we can then use. We can also use laser scanning. So in these two pictures, we have individuals laser scanning human bones, and that will again create a 3D model that we can use in the digital realm. We can also use photogrammetry. So photogrammetry is the process of taking hundreds of pictures of an object and then using sophisticated software that takes all of those hundreds of photographs, puts that information on top of each other, and recreates a three-dimensional model based on the information in the photographs. So it's quite a bit cheaper than a laser scanner, but it does take longer. But again, as the technology is advancing, this is going to get easier and cheaper, and everything is going to become more available throughout the globe. You can also take landmarks. So this is a picture of me taking three-dimensional landmarks on a vertebrae using a microscribe, which is a mechanical arm with a needle at the end. And that needle will take, wherever you put it, will take three-dimensional coordinates in space. So you can, for me, I was taking it on this vertebra. So by the time I took all of the landmarks on that vertebra, that data that I had gave me a reconstruction of the shape of the vertebra that I could then use in the digital realm. So we have a lot of options in how we want to digitize the human bones, and which one you choose has a lot to do with your research question, the availability of the technology, the time that you have to be able to put towards your research and collecting this data, and the computing power that you have access to. So these are examples of types of things that we can get from after digitization. So for example, this is a cast of a hominin skull that has been laser scanned and now exists in the virtual realm, so we can manipulate and use that. This is a CT model, a model of a mummy made from a CT scan. This is a human skull made from photogrammetry. And then this is an example of how you can reconstruct the shape of an object using landmark data. The interesting thing is that once we have all of these information in the digital realm, we can then compare and combine the different types of data. There will be slight error in terms of combining methodologies, but generally that error is going to be smaller than what you're looking for in terms of your research question. So say for me in my research, I might be comparing the shape of a skull of a human to the shape of a skull of a chimpanzee. The difference between a chimpanzee and a human is going to be larger than the difference in the error between a CT scan made model and a photogrammetry made model. But that is something that you have to consider when you're combining them. So that was a really quick rundown on how you digitize bioarchaeology and all the available options out there as of right now. The next question is, why digitize bioarchaeology? So bioarchaeology has been done for decades without this digitization. Does this really add anything to our toolkit? And my answer is yes. Obviously, my research is very much based on this, but I would like to convince you guys that it's also important. So one reason why we can digitize bioarchaeology is that, like Emil showed with his reconstructions of his archaeological sites, we can do the same with burials and graves. So instead of relying on two-dimensional photographs or sketches and descriptions, we can now make three-dimensional reconstructions of the grave that gives us a lot of information about mortuary practices and taphonomy, so how the body was reacted, how the body was damaged or changed in the environment after death. So this is a singular burial here that's been scanned and reconstructed. And then this is an example of a mass burial. So there's many individuals there that have been reconstructed. The other thing is that it makes it so that we can see really cool stuff. So digitizing bioarchaeology makes all of the digitized methods, as long as the researcher shares them, all of these things I found online quickly within a few minutes just Googling. So you guys would have access to be able to find examples like this and interact with them online. So this individual has third stage syphilis. So we can see the lesions on its cranium here and here. That tells us it had syphilis. It also has cranial modification. So when it was a child, it's for cultural reasons, its cranium was pushed and pressurized in a certain way so that it grew to make this shape for cultural symbolic reasons. In the middle here, we have a spine that has severe tuberculosis. So this person had tuberculosis for decades. Their neck would have been coming out in this direction, and the bottom of their spine is coming out this direction. So they would have been completely hunched over. They would not have been able to stand up correctly. This individual is someone that has acromegaly, which is giganticism. So that is when your pituitary gland, which releases growth hormone, releases too much growth hormone. And so that individual never stops growing. So that's when you hear about living giants. That's what they have, is they have a disease called acromegaly. And so this is an example of an individual with that disease. And essentially what's happened is that their bones just kept growing throughout their life. It didn't stop after childhood. There's also available, most of the fossils out there now have 3D scans that you can go and look at and get a really good look at the fossil hominins from Africa and from Asia and the Mediterranean. So this opens up a whole new realm in terms of teaching, in terms of public interaction. It makes it so instead of having, back in the day, in order to see these things, if you wanted to see an Australopithecus cranium, you would have to be able to travel to Africa to be able to see that, or you would have to wait for the museum exhibit to come to you, which doesn't happen very often. So now you'd be able to access this stuff just online. Whether you're an archaeologist or not, the public can access this as well. So for example, when I did my undergrad, we did not have this virtual world of anthropology at the time. And I was learning about disease in ancient bone, but we only had a small skeletal collection in my university. And so that's the only pathologies that I saw. Whatever we had in our collection, which was only a few things, that's all I got to see. And then otherwise I'd have to look in a book. When I moved to England for my master's, because England is an older country with a lot more dead people and they don't mind digging them up as much as in North America, we had access to a larger sample of skeletons. So I got to see a lot of the variation in pathologies and what it looks like, but still you're still confined to what you can see within that one collection. Now with this digital world and this virtual anthropology that we have online, we can get access to all different types of variation in pathology. So instead of having to rely on just two-dimensional pictures, and if you look through the old textbooks, a lot of them are really bad pictures too that look like they've just been photocopied over and over again. Now we can actually move around the skull, look at it, and get a really good image as if the skull is in front of us. The other thing that we can do is the same as Emil talked about virtual excavation. We can do the same type of thing with human remains that are shrouded or covered in some way. So this is an example of mummies. There's natural mummies and then artificial mummies. So natural mummies would have happened in the environment due to them drying out for just whatever persons. It may have not been intentional. And then you have intentional mummies where mummification was part of the mortuary practice of the culture. And instead of having to either just ignore the skeleton in the mummy, or destroy the mummy and destroy the covering and the wrappings to get to the skeleton. Those would be your only choices back in the day. But now we can 3D scan and CT scan the mummies and get a good idea and make a three-dimensional model of the skeleton. And so we can keep both the mummy intact and study the person that was mummified. Cool examples of how this can be used is with CT scans of a mummy. They've actually been able to facially reconstruct what a mummy would have looked like at the time. Facial reconstruction is something that goes beyond mummies as well. There's a lab in Liverpool called Face Lab that does a lot of facial reconstructions. So they were the ones that reconstructed Richard III and quite a few famous people they've done facial reconstructions for. This also is relevant with forensic anthropology. And so the difference is back in the day, before virtual methods, you would have to take the skull and place the modeling clay and the reconstructive materials actually on the skull and build it up to be to try and get that facial reconstruction. Whereas now you take a digitization of that skull, put it in your computer program, and you can do way more reliable and accurate measurements and estimations of the soft tissue covering the skull. And then you can change it easily because it's not actual material. You can just delete it and try again and come up with I'm not going to say it's accurate on a forensic case because I don't believe that it is, but for archaeology, I think it's really cool to attempt to try and make facial reconstructions. And so this would be a lot more accurate and less error prone than doing it with the actual materials on the skull. Also, you're not then damaging the skull with the materials. Another example of what's been really cool once we got to look inside mummies is King Tut. So King Tut is a very famous boy emperor. And when they did his CT scan, they were actually able to confirm a diagnosis of the club foot. So it was rumored that he had issues with his walking, and historically it was known that he used a cane. But once they did the CT scan of his skeleton, they were actually able to diagnose club foot. So what club foot is it's a developmental congenital problem that you're born with and then it develops. And essentially the joints of your foot just aren't in the right spot. So instead of having the joints of your foot, so your legs go onto your ankle and the soles of your feet go flat on the ground, there's a twisting motion because the joints aren't in the proper space. So then now there's a twisting motion and you end up walking on the side of your foot. It depends on how bad the deformation is. And with the CT scan, they're actually able to reconstruct King Tut's pathology and identify exactly how bad it would have been. So this is his reconstruction, King Tut here. Also, using CT scans on mummies, there is a group called Horus, H-O-R-U-S, so Horus, like named after the Egyptian god. And they were able to CT scan Egyptian mummies and identify areas in the soft tissue where the arterial remains, so the remains of the arteries in the skeleton, actually show calcification of the arteries. So calcification is when you have plaque in your arteries. So plaque in your arteries is due to cholesterol and all that stuff. And if it builds up too much, it blocks your blood from flowing through your arteries. And that's what can cause strokes and heart attacks and cardiovascular disease. So they were actually able to identify that in a number of Egyptian mummies who would be fairly upper class, because only upper class people could afford to be mummified after death, that there was actually a high prevalence of cardiovascular disease and this calcification in the arteries of this of the Egyptian population. And they were actually able to show that if you were to take using statistics and take all the error out in terms of sample size and all that, the prevalence of cardiovascular disease in ancient Egypt is not that much different than it is today. And although that's interesting in itself, it's actually quite important because identifying this, that cardiovascular disease happened in the past at the same or close to the same prevalence as modern day, made it so that medical researchers and clinical researchers and started to think, well, we always assume that the reason why cardiovascular disease was so prevalent today, why it's one of the main killers in Westernized societies today, is due to modern lifestyle. And they thought that it was modern lifestyle, modern diet, sitting at our computers all day that led to us having increased cardiovascular disease. But this is archaeological evidence of cardiovascular disease, and it's showing that the prevalence rate isn't that much lower as it would be assumed if it was related only to modern lifestyle. And so this finding actually made it so that people started to look into other reasons why humans might be have commonly afflicted with cardiovascular disease. And so what they've found now is that they think that it's actually related to an inflammatory response, our evolutionary adaptation for an inflammatory response, which helps us when we're younger, because if you get sick or hurt, you want to be able to have inflammation to help you with that sickness when you're young. But you have a trade-off about that, because once you get older, that gene that causes the inflammation helps cause cardiovascular disease. So although there is some, there is a relationship with modern lifestyle, such as diet and stuff and exercise, it's not only explained by that. And this archaeological study was actually one of the main contributors pushing medical doctors into thinking about other things that could be causing it. So to go on to my research a little bit. Okay. So another thing that we can do with digitizing bioarchaeology is we can combine archaeological data with clinical data. So in this study that I'm working on right now, I am looking at the possible evolutionary origins of the Chiari malformation. Chiari malformation is when somebody's skull is a bit too small for their brain. And so there's not enough space for their large modern human brain. And what actually happens is the bottom of your brain, the cerebellum right there, actually starts to herniate outside of your skull. So it herniates through the foramen magnum, the hole at the base of your skull where your spinal cord goes through. And that can cause pain, because if your brain gets pinched in that bone, it causes pain, as well as your spinal cord can get pinched. It can cause paralysis. And if it's really bad, it can be fatal. And what they found is that the rest of the cranium seems to be about the same size, but it's actually the base of the skull that seems to be about 6% smaller in terms of volume in people that have this malformation versus not. So it is actually to do with the size of the brain. Now, modern human brain size started to increase about 2 million years ago. Before that, our brains were quite small, similar to that of a chimpanzee. And before that, so about 4 million years, 6 million years, we also evolved to be bipedal. And so our cranium has been shaped, the shape of our cranium has been restricted and shaped by both our need to walk bipedally, so hold our head up above our shoulders and our hips, and have the base of the skull underneath, pointing down instead of out the back like in a dog or a cat, and to hold and house a large human brain. So it was suggested that there could be some kind of ancestral issue with how some people's cranium develops. So there could be some genes mixed in from our shared ancestry or our interbreeding with other hominin species like Neanderthals or Denisovians that has made it so that there's genes within the normal modern human gene pool that causes some people to have this cranial shape that's really not quite well adapted enough to house a modern human brain. And that mismatch between the large modern human brain and then the shape of this cranium leads to people having this Chiari malformation. This was a suggestion made about 10 years ago, but it hasn't been studied. When I found the paper that suggested it, I thought, well, this is perfect because now we have the technology and the methods to be able to easily answer this question. So what I have been doing is I have CT scans from a neurosurgeon in Manchester of individuals with and without the malformation. On these CT scans, I've made the three-dimensional cranial models, and I've placed three-dimensional landmarks on it so that I can compare the shape of people's heads with the malformation and people's heads without it. Archaeology comes in because I've also included cranial models of fossil hominins. And I've done the same landmarks on the cranial models of the fossil hominins. So in this chart here, what we see is each dot is an individual. The dots that are green and purple and blue and orange and yellow are all hominins, so fossils here. The blue dots are humans without the malformation, so they're humans with just healthy human heads. And the pink dots are humans with the malformation. And essentially what this chart shows you is how they relate to each other in terms of shape. The closer the dots are together, the more similar they are in shape to each other. The farther they are, the more different they are. And so what this is telling us is that we can see some divide between the people with malformations and the people without. And that there is a relationship with some of the fossil hominins. So the fossil humans in green here are grouping down with the people with malformations, and the Neanderthals kind of grouping where it's overlapping with both. So that's a bit confusing. So I've been trying to find more Neanderthal fossils to try and get more Neanderthal points to try and see what's happening there. But not only can we have this visualization of how they group together, but we can actually just run stats on it too and get hard numbers to help us. So in terms of the hard numbers, Neanderthals are actually closer in shape to the individual with the Chiari malformation than they are to healthy humans. So the reason why it's different between the chart and this is the chart is showing us a two-dimensional representation of three-dimensional data. Whereas this distance measurement is taking up all the three-dimensional shape data involved in the crania. So it's not just about the charts. The charts are interesting, but we can actually run hard stats on this data as well to get us information that's going to help us either support or refute our hypotheses. And we can also visualize what the shape changes are being described. So up here we have the typical occipital shape of a healthy human versus individuals with the Chiari. And so we can see that the people with the Chiari malformation actually do have a flatter, more reduced occipital than the healthy humans. We can also, this is a study that I used on bioarchaeological collections of people from Northern Europe, including Iceland and the UK, to try and identify who founded Iceland. So what people actually went to found Iceland. I did photogrammetry. So I traveled to a bunch of countries, took tons of photographs of skulls, made three-dimensional models of those skulls, put three-dimensional landmarks on those skulls, and then using that data, I was able to show, using statistics, that about 30% of the founding Iceland population seems to look closer in terms of their cranial shapes to people from Scandinavia, a contemporary with the time. Well, about 27 and 38% of individuals came from Ireland, Scotland, and Southern Britain, so England at the time. And the great thing about this too is that I still have all this data. So that's one of the great things about digital data is if you go to a place with calipers and you measure it, once you leave, all you have is those measurements now. Whereas with digital data, I still have all of those cranial scans. So I can change the question that I want to ask with them. I can change the landmarks that I want to look at. I can use them for a whole completely different study. because they're still retained and preserved in the digital realm. Another cool thing, I'll just go over this quickly, is that not only can we look at terms of shape and morphology and compare things like that, using people using highly advanced biomechanical simulations and such have been actually being able to compare not only the shape of the human hand with the hands of apes and fossil hominins, but they've actually been able to simulate how that would move and whether the hominin hands would have been able to have the same movements that allow for tool making and using in the fossil record. So making and using tools was a huge step in the evolution of leading to modern humans. We don't know exactly when the first tools were used or developed, and we don't know which hominins were able to develop those tools. So when we do find the first evidence of stone tools in the fossil record, there's more than one hominin species around at the time that could have made it, and we don't know which one made those tools or if more than one of them did. So actually looking at the hands and the finger bones of the fossil hominins, comparing that to apes who don't have the ability for these hand movements with humans that do, and using these high definition simulations, they were actually able to find that based on this, they think that the ability for the precision grip that we have in humans that allows us to manipulate things, this grip here that you can pick up a pencil with, evolved about 2 million years ago. So around the same time with the increase in our large brains. So once you take anthropology and bioarchaeology out of the real world and put it into a digital realm, it really opens up the different questions that you can answer and the different types of information you can glean from the skeleton. It also allows data sharing. So the way that I still have all my data from that Iceland study, people also make their data now freely available, and having your data be open access and freely available is actually an important aspect of a lot of grant applications now. So even within the grant, it says you have to make your data open, or to have it published in a certain journal, it has to be open data. And so sharing this data means that people have access to data now that you may not have before. You would have had to pay to travel somewhere, pay to stay weeks on end in a hotel and stay at a museum to actually be able to access their collections. Whereas now, if they put their collections online, you can do it from sitting here. In the same way that I'm working on people from Manchester, living people from Manchester, I'm working on them sitting in Manila, because we've been able to share the data online. And so overall, having digitized data in bioarchaeology, actually digitizing our collections and our research, makes it so that we can use bioarchaeological data to answer questions that are relevant to biological anthropology, forensic anthropology. So for example, for that, think about how the methods that I use for Iceland could be important for forensic anthropology in terms of identifying ancestry in forensic cases. Also, it makes it so that we can more easily compare and integrate our data and research with clinical and medical research. So there's lots of reasons to digitize bioarchaeology and a lot of potential and benefits from doing so. Okay, thank you. And if you guys are interested in this, want to learn more, want to do research on it, just let me know. Send me an email. Thank you.